starting is the hardest thing for procrastinators. And if you can start, even for 5 or 10 minutes, about half the time you'll continue, which is pretty good odds. One of the myths that the procrastinators have, people who procrastinate around a task, is I'll wait till I feel like doing it. And there's a good chance you ain't ever going to feel like you're going to do it. Don't beat yourself up. What we know is self-compassion does work. There's no research, believe me, this is powerful. No research that says you beat yourself up, oh, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't help with procrastination. It doesn't.
So what are the differences between someone who is lazy and someone who's just struggling with procrastination?
Most procrastinators are not lazy.
Pat Sanaghan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
Why is procrastination something that essentially we all struggle with?
Well, yeah, procrastination is a habit. And how it works is that there's something we don't want to do. It could be a noxious task. It could be an overwhelming task. It's something that's very new, something that's overwhelming. And lots of feelings get generated: anxiety, stress, overwhelm. And the minute you step away from the task, you have immediate emotional relief. Oh, all that stress, all that anxiety. Now, intellectually, we know, oh, we still got to do that. But emotionally, and that's the hook. The relief of emotions, all that stress and worry is gone for the time being. But that's the hook that keeps it kind of going. And about 20 to 25% of the adult population are what they call chronic procrastinators. So that impacts tens of millions of people where it's a lifestyle.
And that's interesting, the part of procrastination becoming a habit. And I have something from the War of Art on that. It says the most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it can become a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed.
Yep. No, that War of Art, I forget the guy's name now. He's written a few books. It's a great book. And those voices that come in our head, oh, we're not smart enough, it's too big, all that stuff that you really have to kind of manage if you're going to move something or create something in the world. I think the War of Art is a great book.
And is there a difference between breaking a bad habit and replacing it with a new one?
I think that's kind of complicated. I'd focus on breaking the bad habit first. Some people are out there and they say you can replace a good habit with a bad habit. I haven't seen that in my practice and in my research. I think that what I want to do is be less of a procrastinator. And the whole thing of the book is how to manage your procrastination. Now, a psychiatrist, which I am not, I have a doctorate in organizational development, might say, oh, that's low impulse control, it's immature response. We can work with that and we can cure your procrastination. I don't believe you can cure it personally because it's in your brain, but you can learn to manage it so it doesn't become overwhelming. And the good habit is we're getting stuff done. I mean, what we know is starting is the hardest thing for procrastinators. And if you can start, even for 5 or 10 minutes, about half the time you'll continue, which is pretty good odds. So just starting, and I just read a quote, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It said, thinking will not ever overcome fear, but action will. And I think that's a very powerful statement. I'm going to have that. I have a few quotes in my office you can see behind me that I refer to often. I just think it's a powerful thing because we ruminate and we think and we plan and, we go nutty instead of just doing something. And you only have to do something for 5 minutes and you move things forward. That's really important for procrastinators, is just do something and move the ball forward a little bit. Not to read the whole book, write the whole paper. Write 3 pages, write 2 pages. You've moved the ball forward.
So could we go into your 3 core strategies for overcoming procrastination?
Yeah, absolutely. I was writing my dissertation, 20, 25 years ago. And what I was doing, I was reading my procrastination, right? I was doing more and more research, which feels productive, but in the end, you got to write the darn thing, right? So one of my chairperson on my committee said, Pat, you got to start writing this thing. I had 7 years to do it. I was up against year 7. He says, I can give you a 1-year extension, but I need to see some chapters. And it was scary. And I actually went to a therapist, which 25 years ago, a lot of people didn't go to therapists. And she said, well, you're not afraid of success. I had a pretty successful career till then. And you're not afraid of failure. She said, you got to learn ways to manage this habit that you have, this procrastination. And at that time, 25 years ago, there was very, very, very little written about procrastination. So she said, why don't you ask some people, here, think about this, ask some people who've completed their dissertation how they did it. I said, okay, that's a good idea. So I asked 3 of my colleagues, and they all had these little strategies. that I never even thought about. So the three that have really kind of been core principles for me for the last 25 years, one is chewable chunks. You can do work in 10 and 20 and 30-minute segments of time, not an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours. I thought you had to sit down and just punch it out. You get tired, you get overwhelmed. They say, the heck with it. So just do 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time, take a little bit of a break, then come back to it. The thing you have to be very careful about is you don't want to go on social media during those breaks, because you can go down a rabbit trail quickly and end up reading about panda bears in China. So chewable chunks is important. Making your progress visible is another one that was really powerful. And so every day I have an agenda that has my activities on it that I need to do. And I limited it to 6. For years and years, I had 10 things. I get to 7, 8, sometimes 9 and feel like a failure. And a buddy of mine says, I only do 5 things a day, Pat. I said, really? So I have this across from my desk. It's bright yellow so I can see it from a distance. And anytime I get something done, as you can see here, I got this big black marker and I score it off. It feels wonderful. So making your progress visible somehow is important. And the third one is something I resisted. The third one is each one of them have what they call a reward map. After each chapter, most dissertations are 6 or 7 chapters, and they're onerous. I mean, they're really hard to do. And each one had rewards after each chapter, not at the end of the dissertation, which can take you 2 and 3 years after each chapter. So I'll give you a quick example. One of the people I talked to was a guy who liked golfing, and he said after each chapter, he plans to go to Palm Springs, fly there and have a golf weekend, which is one of the better golf courses in the country. It cost him money, obviously, but it was a thing he would anticipate, he would be very excited about, and he would felt he's really doing himself well after a chapter was finished to go have some golf in a beautiful place. So chewable chunks, rewards work, and making progress visible are 3 strategies that will manage a lot of procrastination.
And I think for working in the 30, 45-minute chunks, it's very effective for me doing college because that is the thing I absolutely hate the most right now. So
Yeah.
being able to just break it up into small pieces and just push through it instead of, working 6 hours straight, but having breaks set in there and, really just having a routine I can follow every day and every week of, here's how we're going to plan it out. And, the different time spaces has helped me a lot.
Yes, absolutely. It's so smart. In fact, most of the research, or I'd say 80% of the research on procrastination has been done with college students, because you have a semester, right? And sometimes you have trimesters, but you have a bucket of time and you can track progress over time. So a lot of the research has been done with students. And one of the things we have found with students is in 15 weeks, week 14 is when they begin to do all the reports, right? And they get stressed out and they're smoking and probably drinking too much. And the professors just every couple of weeks say, how are those reports going? On week 3, week 5, week 7, the productivity goes right through the roof. So you're doing a really smart thing there. 30 to 45 minutes max, take a walk, talk to a friend, get a latte, listen to some music, and then come back most of the time you'll come back and you'll do another 30 or 45-minute chunk. So I think you're really being smart about that.
And with the making your progress visible, whether it's, other podcasters, entrepreneurs who maybe we don't know that what we're doing is going to come to fruition in some sort of significant way, how would you recommend going about doing that? Because it's easy just to work 12 hours a day because there's always something more to do.
Right. Well, real quick side comment. Entrepreneurs, I work with a lot of young entrepreneurs now because I'm the old guy and I've made a lot of mistakes. I can teach them a few things. Their biggest challenge is delegation because they do everything, right? They're the bottle washer and they're setting the table and they're painting the house. They're doing everything. And if they can't learn to delegate, and it's hard for them because it's their baby, they're going to be very ineffective. So learning to delegate, which is a procrastination trick, right? Give it to somebody else who you trust, who's got competence, and they can kind of move it forward. I think there's 2 ways to manage progress, and that one is by time. So I'll give you an example. Ernest Hemingway, a very famous guy, won a couple of Nobel Prizes. He would get up. You talked about routines a little bit a while ago. He'd get up in the morning and very early, like 6:30, he would stand while he wrote, and then he would work for either 5 hours or 5 written pages. So if he had a heck of a day in an hour and a half, he did the 5 pages, he was done for the day. He didn't keep on. So one is a process and one is a product. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you're doing your 10 hours of work, whatever it is, to be checking off hour number one, I use Post-its. Sometimes I use Post-its like this, 30-minute chunks. I have it on a wall. I get my 30 minutes done. I go and I crumble it up and I throw it in the trash. And what will happen is if you got these 30-minute chunks, these Post-its, over time they'll begin to disappear, and that's very motivating. Did I explain that right?
Yeah. So it's
Yep.
kind of having smaller goals that you keep working towards and keep accomplishing that you get that reassurance that you're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, something mark your progress somehow. And small progress is big. I'll tell you a real quick story. There's a very famous ghostwriter who wrote 60 books. And so someone was interviewing him and he said, "How the heck did you write 60 books?" And he said, two crappy pages a day. He said, "What?" He said, "I just wrote get hit it to an editor. At the end of the year, I had 600 or 700 pages, and I usually get 2 books out of those things there." So he didn't do his self-editing. That's another thing procrastinators do a lot of. They write a couple sentences, and they begin to edit it. Write sentences and edit it. Those are two different tasks and two different skill sets. So I would continue to write, give it to somebody else to edit because they're two different skill sets. And if you're editing and writing at the same time, it'll take you 10 years to write a book, and you don't want that.
Yeah, the delegation is such an interesting thing, especially how you said it's overlooked because when you're starting out, it has to be, the podcast I post have to be the way I want it. The editing has to be the way I like it.
Yep.
And that's so interesting, the time you get back from delegating that to put more time into finding the right guests, to
Yes,
scripting out questions for the episode. Yeah.
that's excellent. I mean, it plays your strength, but you're not trying to do everything. But I understand it's a very hard pull, because it's yours, right? This is your baby. You put a lot of time and effort into it. So you have to find the right people to do that. I use a lot of Fiverr consultants to do editing and do other things for me and publishing books and things like that. I said, my job's to write and then give it an editor to make it really sound good and then give it somebody else to help me publish it. So you're on the right track there. But it's hard when you're by yourself trying to, make a difference. And, but if you can delegate, you'll be much more effective. And finding good guests is what you got to do, right? I mean, if you don't do that, nothing else matters.
And when it comes to rewarding ourselves for completing tasks, what does overdoing it look like?
Yeah, I think you have to reward yourself after significant accomplishments, right? So, I mean, let's just say after each chapter of the dissertation or the book, that would be a reward after each one of those. You wouldn't do it in page one. Oh, geez, I finished the whole page. Oh, let me get a latte. So you have to be kind of commonsensical about that. But you have to be clear because sometimes the anticipation of the reward is even greater than the reward itself. You talk about birthday parties and planning for birthday parties and Christmas parties and Thanksgiving. Oh my God, people are so excited. And you get to it and it's okay, but the anticipation of the event sometimes can be very, very, very motivating. So I would I'd also have a thought partner. Sit down with someone you trust who's, a smart person and say, we're very bad at estimating how long things are going to take. Really bad. I mean, Dan Kahneman was a Princeton professor and he just died about 2 months ago at 91, won a Nobel Prize on his thinking. And one of the things he said was powerful, and I have the quote in my office. He says, something meaningful will always take longer, and it'll be harder. So you got to set yourself right in the beginning. Okay, if I give it a week, it's probably 2 weeks. And if I don't have these strategies in place and reward maps in place and these chewable chunks, it's probably going to be a lot harder to do, and I want to make sure I get done. So those are two things that I have a quote on my office that says, it's going to be harder, Pat. I mean, I've written 12 books. And each book is an aggravation. You think, oh, by this time, this would be really easy to do. Each book is different. Each one has its own challenge.
Interesting. Yeah, it reminds me of a quote. You can't wish for an easy character, or no, you can't wish for a strong character and an easy life. Each is the price of the other.
Yes, right. That's a great quote. Yeah, to accomplish meaningful things takes time, effort, patience, worry. I mean, it isn't easy to do meaningful things, but the reward is pretty powerful.
So, what is the current trajectory that social media is having in procrastination? Because these different social media companies are not going to make their software, their platforms less addictive.
It's a powerful point. There's a great book called Irresistible. It's about 2 or 3 years old. And when I read it, I'm not a big techie to say the very least, but I know a little bit about it. And these things have been designed by physicists and psychologists and psychiatrists and biologists to give us dopamine hits all the time. And it's designed for that. So the social media piece, you got to do that in chewable chunks. You can reward yourself and just say, I don't look at social media until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I want my best time, the way I can think and high energy in the morning. In the afternoon, I can do not mindless tasks, but easy tasks, and I might do some social media. Excuse me. One of the things I have to watch out for is I like stock investing. And, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I can, oh my God, look at that. IBM's up and they're down, they're up, they're down. So you have to have some disciplines. I check it in the morning and I check it in the afternoon. And it took me a year to get that habit because I was, I wonder how the IBM's looking or Apple. I heard good things about Apple today. And then all of a sudden, an hour later, I'm reading about Apple statistics and research. And so you really have to do it in chewable chunks. But I don't think you can tear people away from it. I mean, there's some people out there. There's a book called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, which is an outstanding book. And he really talks about really turning off all the electronics. But I don't think that's realistic. If you got kids, if you have other responsibilities, you can't turn off everything. But if you can turn it off for an hour, you can be extraordinarily productive.
And for me, what I've done, I've deleted social media off my phone for almost 2 months now.
That's
And the
well.
amount of time I've had for working on the show and college it's crazy how many hours a day I would waste without even realizing it. So it would be 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here,
Yes.
and a day it adds up, and then that's a week, and then a month, and the hours on end is insane.
So what motivated you to do that? Because that's a real tough habit to break.
I knew that if I kept social media on my phone, then the amount of input I would be putting into the show and to college would be not enough to achieve my end goal.
So you had a real picture. I'd call that a vision or a preferred future. You had some real motivation to do something significant, and you knew you had to change something. That's fantastic. That's not easy to do. If you don't mind, do you mind? I do most of my work in higher ed, by the way. Just so you know, the last 30 years I've done a lot of work in higher ed. Where are you going to college?
I'm at a community college right now.
Fantastic. Community colleges are agile. They're mobile. They're the future of higher ed, in my opinion. And they meet the students where they are. I mean, it's we have a Bucks County. I live in Pennsylvania, and Bucks County Community College is our local community college, and it's an outstanding resource. And you can go there and explore and do things and learn and build some capacities, and then choose other opportunities. But if you got this show in college, those are two jobs, and knocking out the social media, that's a very smart thing to do. It takes real discipline.
It does because it's always, what are people up to? What am I missing out on? But once you really take the dive into it, you really see that you're not missing much of anything.
Right. And the thing is, the seductive thing is, it doesn't feel like you're wasting your time, right? You're feeling connected to people. You're learning some things, not very good things, but that's where I had to learn. Pat, you're on this way too much, and it's always kind of fascinating, but it's not real productive. So, I mean, what you did there was very, very smart. You'll be very successful if you continue with that discipline.
So, what are the differences between someone who is lazy and someone who's just struggling with procrastination?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most procrastinators are not lazy. And I'm not a lazy guy. I've written 12 books. I have a consulting business. I'm very, quote, successful, and I still procrastinate. Lazy people don't have anxiety, worry, or stress. One of my better friends, Michael, is a very talented guy. And if it doesn't happen today, Pat, maybe we'll get around on Friday. We'll tackle that. I mean, if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. Where procrastinators are always in the back of their mind, here I'm at the football game enjoying myself, but I got to do that report by Monday. I mean, lazy people, there's no worry about that kind of stuff. So God bless the lazy people because they have no stress or worry. Procrastinators have a lot of that. So that's the big difference. And most procrastinators are not lazy.
And for someone who is lazy watching this, I think the biggest the biggest portion of my life where I would say that I was being lazy was when I didn't have an upper aim. I didn't have a goal I was working towards. And then if I don't have anything like that, then I'm just living life. Life is just passing me by and it's just mundane and you're stuck. So I would say, what kind of small goal can you start with and then, keep working your way up? Just like how with procrastination, you have the 30-minute sticky notes, you rip one off every 30 minutes and
Yep.
then before you know it, you have a couple hours done. So how can you implement small goals into your life to realign yourself?
I think that's really powerful. No, not big goals. I mean, small goals are really important. And Teresa Mabile, she's a professor out of Harvard, and for 30 years she studied this and said small progress makes a difference. You build confidence, you get some experience, you get some strategies, and you can kind of move the things forward. So small goals are really, really good. And we tend to be over aspirational. Like where I got caught in my dissertation, my professor said, I know what your problem is, said Pat. And I said, well, what's my problem? He said, you're trying to write the dissertation of the century. Well, aren't you supposed to do that? He said, no, 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 no. You're supposed to write a dissertation where you can get done and it makes a difference. So the aspiration was way too high. That's why I was getting caught in research and research and research. He said, you're supposed to contribute to the field of knowledge and get it done. So that was good advice for me. So having small goals, and you'll feel like you've accomplished something if they're meaningful. I mean, they have to be meaningful to you, but they can be very motivating.
It reminds me of the quantity versus quality, this back and forth discussion about, content that goes out when you're starting out, and it's called the 85% rule. So
Yep.
you make a piece of content 85% of what it could be, because the other 15% to get it to 100%, whatever that looks like, would take so many more hours that it's just going to hinder you in the long run from not having a quantitative perspective about getting the most amount of good content out instead of a great piece.
Yep, absolutely. 85%. Some people say it's 80%. I worked at a company one time. They were having some problems, and they said the 80%. They were perfectionists. The five guys at the top were perfectionists, which is a very bad place to be because you don't get much done. And they understood that 85% of the time the product is good enough to get out there. Now we're not talking about safety issues, but the product they had was good enough to get out there, and then they would continually improve it as they got feedback and let their customers know this is the process. We could wait another year and not get it to you, or we could do it now, and you can help us craft this thing and make it even better. And it made them a lot of money.
So for procrastinating, for people who aren't entrepreneurs or students, maybe they're in a job, how do you go about helping someone? Because with finding the difference, maybe they don't like the work and they're stuck in a meaningless job, so they just sit at their desk all day and just waste time and act busy.
Yeah, that happens a lot more than people can imagine. Um, I'm finishing a book on happiness, and what I found is a lot of unhappy people, right? And there's actually a worldwide survey on happiness, and the United States is number 19. And Iceland, I was just in Iceland for about a week, 2 weeks ago. Iceland and Denmark and Sweden are all in the top five. And we're number 19 with all the money we have and the riches and all that kind of stuff, opportunities. It just is pretty amazing that's the situation. I think you got to find something outside your work because sometimes you can't change your job, right? I mean, you might be trapped geographically, you might have family obligations. You got to find something outside of work. And that could be volunteering. That could be something in your church or your civic association that brings you some passion, builds some skills if you feel trapped. But one of the things that allows people just kind of do okay work is very poor supervision. And you need to have bosses that are not, dictators and mean to people, be saying, hey, Pat, there's 6 reports that got to get done. Everyone else has done 8. You're doing about 3. So what do we need to do to bump you up to 6? Because you're not being as productive as you can be in helping the team out. And, having those kind of conversations, most people don't like to have those conversations because if there's no motivation, I'll stay with 3 reports the rest of my life, right? I'm getting paid, I get insurance. So it's really hard. Motivation is really a tricky thing. Um, One of the things we know about motivation is that people are learning, they get motivated. Another thing we know is if you have some autonomy over what you do, like I assume you have a lot of autonomy over what you do, and the autonomy is a driver. I can make my choices. I can work when I want to work with who I want to work with. Those are powerful motivators. So motivation is also very small. There's a guy named Baumeister who wrote a book called Motivation. He's kind of the world's leading expert in it. And he says we think we have these big puddles of motivation in our backyard. We just go there and grab it. He says it's like a small battery that it gets used very quickly. So you have to use your motivation, like for procrastinators, at the beginning of a task, because that's the hardest time. So what can you do to punch and get started? Because we know you'll probably continue. For me, it's the last mile. When I go write a book or write a paper or something like that, it's the last few pages that I go, oh boy, I'm so tired of this thing here. That's where I have to use my motivation to punch through to the other side.
Yeah, the whole motivation versus discipline debate is interesting because, being 10, 11 weeks into the fall semester, I'm not motivated to do my work. I'm a couple months into doing podcasting. I'm not as motivated to do it. Now it's shifting to being disciplined and showing up even when I don't want to show up.
Right.
It's a big shift that I've gone through recently.
That's a really important point because one of the myths that the procrastinators have, or people who are procrastinating around a task, is I'll wait till I feel like doing it. And there's a good chance you ain't ever going to feel like you're going to do it. I don't feel like I'm ever going to do my income tax, and things with details really frustrate me. So I take a long time to do my invoices. But having the focus on getting it done is and when I watch football while I'm doing my income taxes because I love the sport. I do about 10 minutes of work and watch the game and do another 10 minutes. It takes me 3 times as long, but I get done. Right. So that's the key with procrastination, to get done, not to get done in a particular time frame. Now, with taxes, you got to get done about April the 15th or they start fining you. I get that. But I think I've always thought the income tax process was something like 1,100 pages is designed for procrastinators because we get overwhelmed and we pay millions and billions of dollars in penalties and taxes and things like that. So I have to have those structures in mind that says, okay, when I'm doing my income tax, I got to have rewards and I got to have something to stimulate me at the same time.
And can we go into your book on procrastination?
Sure, it's called How to Be a Better Procrastinator, and it's on Amazon, and it's a good book. I mentioned I've done 12 books. I've written a lot of books on strategic planning and leadership development because my arena is higher education, and I just finished one on creativity, and this one is my favorite book because it'll help people. A lot of procrastinators suffer. They beat themselves up. They're self-critical. They don't go for the job. They say, "Oh, I don't think I'm smart enough." I mean, we have all these blockages that keep us from having a better life. And what I like about this is it's research based. I mean, I don't just kind of wing it with a few beers and come up with some ideas. A lot of research behind it. Very, very accessible. And procrastinators oftentimes do not start at the beginning of the book. About 20% of them start at the back of the book. Well, in the back of the book, I got 24 lessons for procrastinators. So wherever you open the book, page 14, boom, there's something. So each page has something that's a little juicy and you can get an idea from. So it's designed for procrastinators. And it might not be you as a procrastinator. There's oftentimes it's someone you work with or someone you have a personal relationship with. That could be a spouse or a partner. That could be you're one of your best friends that's really struggling. And this is a way to help them out. And there's an ebook too. So I think that's a little bit cheaper, but I'm not a big fan of ebooks. I like books.
So you just mentioned how you've written 12 books. Is there any kind of advice you would give to someone wanting to improve in their writing ability?
Yeah, just write, and worry about the editing afterwards, or get somebody. I've co-written a few books, and I always pick someone. I don't need someone like who has my kind of smartness. I need someone with a different skill set. And there's some people who just love to edit, love to do those dots and semicolons and all that kind of stuff there, and tear your stuff apart. I write, I hand it to him or her. They clean it up, and all of a sudden we got a product. So we're marrying our talents and not trying to do both things at the same time. So have realistic expectations. The other thing, this is a little bit of a tough strategy, is something called an accountability partner. An accountability partner is you pick someone in your life who you really respect, someone you admire, you respect, you don't have to love them, but, an important person. And you commit to them what you're supposed to do. I will finish the paper by the end of the month. And what happens with accountability? So it's risky, right? Because you don't want to come to your accountability partner and say, well, Bob, I just never got around to it, because you're going to disappoint yourself and disappoint them. So it's not meant to do small tasks. It's the tougher task. To have an accountability partner is really, really a positive strategy. The other thing to think about too is something called temptation bundling. And I alluded to it when I was watching I'm watching TV and doing the income tax. Temptation bundling is when you take something noxious and you marry it with something positive. So I don't want to clean out the garage. Well, I do it with a buddy. Have a few beers, get it done. Or I listen to the sports program. Or if I've got to do my laundry, I watch a movie while I'm doing my laundry. So you marry something positive with something not so positive, and sometimes that can kind of propel you forward. Is this being helpful?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I do think it's even what is a greater motivator? Is it the satisfaction of getting the reward, or is it the pain of not accomplishing your goals and still being in that current state where you're at? I think that can help propel you forward, because even, we talked about earlier not having a goal and an upper aim. Imagine a whole life of that. You just have a mundane life. I think that is a significant motivator to help push you forward to take the first step.
Yep, absolutely. I just read something, it's pretty stark data. It said that 18% of high school students, male high school students, do not get out of high school with a degree. So that's a lot of millions of young men. And that between the ages of 18 and 34, 36% of those people are living at home with mom and dad. And that's not meant as a criticism, but it's kind of this notion around failure to launch, that just kind of floating through things. And I think that's something we got to start thinking about in getting, whether it be community colleges or something to get people kind of motivated to do other things and make a contribution. The last thing I wanted to do it when I was 30 years old, be living with my parents, but a lot of young men are caught in that cycle, and they got to figure out ways to get out of that.
It's the role that comfort plays in their lives. Maybe they were never pushed out of the nest, so to speak, and now that's all they know.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm a lot more older than you are, but when I was growing up, you're 18, you're either in college or you're in the Army, but you ain't at home, buddy. And so I said, okay, well, you got to choose one of those. So, and that was with love and affection too, but it gets you a little bit of discipline in your life, which is important. Discipline is really an important thing. It shouldn't be an overpowering negative thing. It should be an enhancer and gets you motivated to move things forward. We also know that people learning things is very motivational. So if you have, like I said before, autonomy, you feel like you're making a difference and you're learning some things, those are three powerful motivators to maybe get those people out of the basement.
All right, great. Pat, where can the listeners find you at?
I have a webpage, thesanaghangroup.com. There's papers there, there's books. I think there's a couple of videos there of interviews and things like that. And all my books, all 12 books, are on amazonbooks.com. So, and they're all reasonably priced. I'm not here to make my first million, so they're reasonably priced, and we're getting good reviews. And I hope that what we shared today, it helps some people. Don't beat yourself up. What we know is self-compassion does work. There's no research, believe me, this is powerful. No research that says you beat yourself, oh, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't help with procrastination. It doesn't. So instead of that, saying, okay, today's a new day, let me do a 10, 20, 30-minute task and create a new beginning. But being kinder to yourself actually is working.
Yeah, and also living in the moment. Don't dwell on past failures, because if you live in the past, you're depressed. If you live in the future, you're anxious. But if you can live in the moment, that's where you want to be.
That's where you want to be. That's great advice.
All right, Pat Sanaghan, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Good luck going forward.
Thank you guys for watching this episode of The Pursuit of Knowledge. If you guys are watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below with any insights you have from the episode. And if you guys are listening to this on a podcast platform, please leave a review and let me know what you guys think. And if you found value in this episode, then you might like this one as well. And if you guys aren't, please subscribe, and thanks again for watching.